Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about something that is a little bit larger than King Arthur or Robin Hood or anything like that. I wanted to talk about Atlantis. So there are all sorts of theories about Atlantis, so many, countless theories. But the one which I think is by far the most plausible and one which is accepted by some scholars is that the story of Atlantis came from twisted, corrupted legends and accounts of the Minoans, a historical civilization about 3,500 years ago. But there are some maybe not so well put together presentations of this theory, so I wanted to explain it the best I could and maybe add a few details which haven't really been so thoroughly presented in other arguments to this effect. So I'm going to do a series of videos about this theory on Atlantis. And today I wanted to just focus on the general picture that Plato presents about Atlantis, because even if something has a few specific details which match Atlantis, if it doesn't fit the general picture, then there's no real reason to accept that it could have had anything to do with the story. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at the general idea, the general picture that Plato paints about Atlantis. So what was it? It was, well, according to Plato, it was an island that was outside the columns of Hercules, or the columns of Heracles, also known as the Pillars of Hercules. So what exactly were the Pillars of Hercules, or where were they? It's commonly claimed that they're represented by the two mountains on either side of the Strait of Gibraltar, and that's true that in some accounts that's what the Pillars of Hercules refers to, but it's just not true that this is the only place that term was applied to. There are actually a number of different places in various different historical records that were referred to by that name. And according to some scholars, the Gulf of Laconia, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Gulf of Laconia in Greece was also referred to by that name, the columns or pillars of Hercules. So Crete, which was the main island of the Minoans, that was indeed outside that gulf, that area with the 2 points, which could have been the Pillars of Hercules that Plato was referring to. So it fits in that regard, or could fit in that regard. But here's the really significant thing. He also said that it was bigger, that Atlantis was bigger than Libya and Asia. So obviously this doesn't fit Crete. In fact, it doesn't fit any island really that that had a civilization, a naval civilization dating back as long as Plato said. But what's significant about this point is that the word that Plato used for larger, and I'm going to try and pronounce this though I don't speak Greek, but something along the lines of meson or meson, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It's very, very similar to the Greek word for between, which is also essentially meson, spelt M-E-S-O-N, and larger is spelt M-E-I-Z-O-N. So both of them are very similar to meson or meson, something like that. So it could be that somewhere along the lines, perhaps if the Egyptian priests that this account originally came from, well, if they had got it from Greek traders or travellers or scribes or whatever, perhaps they misunderstood that word, and that maybe they misunderstood the word for between as larger. So does that fit Crete? Well, Crete is between Libya and Asia, as in Turkey, which was known as Asia Minor back then. So in that sense as well, Crete and the whole Minoan civilization, that fits the idea that it was outside the columns of Hercules and between Libya and Asia. So that does rely on a textual corruption, which is not proved. So that's a bit of speculation. So granting the theory that point, in what other ways does it fit the description given by Plato? Well, he says that it was the way to other islands, and from these islands you might pass through the whole of the opposite continent, which surrounded the true ocean. So from Crete, the main island of the Minoans, there was a well-established trade route through the Aegean Sea, through all these other islands in the Aegean, to get to the continent, which we might call Eurasia plus Africa, which really does surround the Mediterranean. And obviously they didn't have any awareness of the Americas back then. So that really does fit the Minoan civilization, being between Libya and Asia, and being the way from Crete, the way to the opposite continent which surrounds the ocean that they were aware of. So that fits perfectly. But also then he said that the Atlanteans had rule over that island and several others, as well as parts of the continent. And that perfectly fits the Minoan civilization, because they ruled over Crete. They ruled over a few other of the Aegean islands, like famously Thera, but also others in the Aegean. And they also had a great influence over other parts of the Mediterranean, that they had potentially, it's difficult to tell in the archaeological record, but they potentially even had colonies in places like Israel and Turkey, and even a great deal of influence in Egypt, though maybe not a colony there, but they definitely had a great deal of influence over many parts of the surrounding Mediterranean, as well as rule over their main island and a few others. So that is a perfect fit for the description given by Plato. So that's just the general picture, and obviously he describes them as a naval civilization, which the Minoans were famous for. So that's not going into any real specifics, that's just the general picture of Atlantis that Plato provides, and which many, many other suggested candidates for Atlantis do not meet. They maybe meet a few specific details, but the general picture is completely wrong. But the Minoans do fit the general picture given by Plato of the Atlanteans. So in the next video, we'll have a look at some more specific details about Atlantis and their customs and their cultures and their religion, and see how they fit very specifically with the Minoans.